There is a plant that state governments have made illegal to grow, agricultural agencies spend hundreds of millions trying to eradicate, and chemical companies developed specialized herbicides specifically designed to kill. It's classified as a federal noxious weed. Possession of its seeds can result in fines. Farmers have gone bankrupt because they couldn't control it. And here's what they're not telling you. This plant produces more complete protein per acre than soybeans, contains more calcium than dairy products, thrives in conditions that would kill conventional crops, and provides free food that requires zero fertilizer, zero pesticides, and zero irrigation once established. One plant can produce over 600,000 seeds in a single season, seeds that remain viable in soil for more than 40 years, seeds that, when ground into flour, provide complete nutrition superior to wheat, corn, and rice combined. Big agriculture has declared war on this plant. They've spent over $1 billion developing herbicides to destroy it. They've lobbied state legislatures to criminalize it. They've convinced farmers that its presence means financial ruin. But the real reason they fear this plant has nothing to do with agriculture and everything to do with independence. This is the story of Palmer amaranth and its edible cousins, the plants that broke the chemical agriculture system and revealed the lie at the heart of modern farming. By the end of this video, you'll understand why the most illegal plant in America might be the most valuable crop for food security, and why they'll do anything to make sure you never grow it. Let's start with what happened in 2004 that changed American agriculture forever. A cotton field in Macon County, Georgia, became the epicenter of a new crisis. Weed scientists, led by Stanley Culpepper, walked the rows expecting the usual aftermath of glyphosate spraying: dead weeds and clean soil. Instead, towering Palmer amaranth plants stood untouched, their leaves green and defiant. The herbicide that had controlled fields for nearly a decade had failed. Lab tests confirmed the impossible. These plants were immune to glyphosate, the world's most widely used herbicide, the active ingredient in Roundup, the chemical that was supposed to have ended weed problems forever. The culprit was not a single mutation, but a genetic sleight of hand that no one had predicted. Inside each cell, Palmer amaranth had multiplied copies of a gene called EPSPS. Glyphosate works by targeting this enzyme and shutting down a pathway essential for plant growth. But with up to 160 copies of the EPSPS gene, Palmer amaranth simply overwhelmed the chemical, producing so much enzyme that the herbicide was rendered useless. Under the microscope, fluorescent markers lit up the extra gene copies like city lights at night. This wasn't slow evolution. This was a genetic jailbreak triggered by years of unbroken chemical pressure. Within months, fields across Georgia and then the wider South told the same story: amaranth that refused to die. For farmers, the consequences were immediate. Where one plant survived, 600,000 seeds would scatter on the wind. Crews were forced to pull millions of weeds by hand, acre by acre, as combines jammed on stalks thicker than baseball bats. The Roundup era, once seen as the end of weed problems, had instead created a new adversary that could not be sprayed away. Palmer amaranth didn't creep quietly into the landscape. Within a decade of that first glyphosate-resistant field in Georgia, it swept across the American South and Midwest, overrunning more than 20 million acres of soybeans and corn. On USDA maps, the red blotches of infestation spread like a rash, county after county reporting fields choked with stalks taller than a man, each one able to drop up to 1 million seeds in a single season. For farmers, the reality hit hard and fast. Combines built to chew through soy and corn stalled on stems as thick as broomsticks. In Arkansas and Tennessee, crews abandoned harvests mid-row, forced to clear Palmer by hand at a cost of $200 per acre. Money that once went to seed and fertilizer now funneled into labor just to keep the fields open. The economic fallout spiraled. USDA estimates put annual losses from Palmer amaranth at over $1 billion, factoring in both yield reductions and the mounting cost of chemical and manual control. In 2010, Illinois growers watched as 90% of a soybean field was written off. Palmer had slipped in with contaminated seed, and by the time the mistake was caught, it was too late to save the crop. Extension offices issued warnings. A single escape plant could seed the next decade's problem. Machinery dealers fielded calls about combine damage and the need for custom retrofits as blades dulled and belts snapped under the strain of rogue amaranth. Agronomists called it a weed apocalypse. In some counties, local ordinances mandated equipment cleaning between fields to slow the spread, but the seeds traveled on wind, boots, and truck tires. The monoculture model, plant, spray, repeat, had met its match. Fields once managed by chemistry alone now demanded a return to hand labor, crop rotation, and vigilance. Palmer amaranth became public enemy number one. State agriculture departments classified it as a noxious weed. Federal agencies added it to prohibited plant lists. Possession of seeds became a legal liability. But here's the question no one in agriculture wants to answer. Why is a plant that's nearly impossible to kill, requires no inputs, and thrives in terrible conditions considered a threat instead of a solution? Because Palmer amaranth and its edible cousins represent everything industrial agriculture cannot control. Let me show you what they're really afraid of. While Palmer amaranth was being classified as the most dangerous weed in American agriculture, researchers at universities and USDA facilities were quietly documenting something that never made it into the warnings. Palmer amaranth is edible. And not just edible, nutritionally superior to the crops it's accused of destroying. The leaves, which farmers are taught to fear and eradicate, contain up to 38% protein by dry weight. That's higher than soybeans at 36%, higher than any conventional leafy green. The seeds, the very thing that makes Palmer impossible to control, contain 15 to 18% complete protein, with all 9 essential amino acids. Unlike soy, which is deficient in methionine, amaranth protein is complete on its own. A single Palmer amaranth plant, the kind that farmers pay $200 per acre to remove, can produce 600,000 seeds. That's 600,000 seeds of complete protein, calcium, iron, and magnesium. Enough seed to plant multiple acres or mill into several pounds of nutritious flour. And here's what makes this plant truly dangerous to the system. It grows without permission, without inputs, and without control. Palmer amaranth thrives in heat that wilts corn. It survives drought that kills soybeans. It grows in poor soil that would require thousands of dollars in amendments for conventional crops. It uses C4 photosynthesis, the same efficient pathway that makes corn productive, but with greater heat and drought tolerance. In practical terms, Palmer amaranth produces food with a fraction of the water and zero fertilizer. The plant can grow 2 to 3 inches per day during peak season, from germination to seed production in 60 to 90 days, multiple generations per year in warm climates. For a food system built on selling seeds annually, selling fertilizer constantly, and selling herbicides repeatedly, a plant that needs none of these things and reproduces itself 600,000 times per generation is an existential threat. But Palmer amaranth isn't some recent invader. It's native to the southwestern United States and Mexico. It has been here longer than industrial agriculture. And its cousins, the edible amaranth varieties cultivated by the Aztecs, Incas, and indigenous peoples across the Americas, were staple crops feeding millions of people for thousands of years. The Aztec Empire demanded amaranth as tribute. Entire provinces paid their taxes in amaranth seed. It was ground into flour, popped like popcorn, mixed with honey for sacred rituals, and cooked into porridge. When Spanish conquistadors arrived in 1519, they saw this immediately. They understood that a population with access to free, self-perpetuating, nutritionally complete food was a population that couldn't be controlled. So they declared Amaranth illegal. They burned over 10,000 hectares of fields. They cut off the hands of farmers caught growing it. They systematically erased it from the agricultural landscape. But they couldn't erase the plant itself. Amaranth survived. It adapted. It evolved. And in the American Southwest, Palmer amaranth continued growing where it always had, in disturbed soil, along field edges, in places where indigenous peoples had cultivated its ancestors. When chemical agriculture arrived with its herbicides and monocultures, Palmer amaranth did what all amaranth has done for millennia. It survived. Now here's where the story gets interesting. The chemical agriculture industry tells farmers that Palmer amaranth is a weed because it competes with crops for resources. That's the official explanation. But let's look at what really happens when Palmer amaranth appears in a field. Palmer amaranth doesn't just compete with soybeans or corn. It outcompetes them. It grows faster, taller, and more vigorously than any crop plant. Why? Because crops like soy and corn have been bred for generations to be dependent on fertilizers, irrigation, and chemical protection. They're domesticated to the point of weakness. They need constant intervention to survive. Palmer amaranth needs nothing. It's what a plant looks like when it hasn't been bred into dependence. It's what food production looks like without corporate control. And that's the real threat. If Palmer amaranth were just a competitor for resources, farmers could manage it through rotation, cover cropping, and integrated management. But Palmer amaranth reveals something more dangerous to the agricultural industry, that a free, nutritious, self-perpetuating food plant can thrive where expensive, patented, input-dependent crops struggle. The seeds of Palmer amaranth are viable for 40-plus years in soil. Buried seeds can germinate decades after the last plant grew. That's a seed bank that outlasts any human planting schedule, any corporate seed contract, any patent. One plant produces enough seeds to feed a family for a year if milled into flour. And those seeds can then plant enough amaranth to feed a neighborhood, or a community, or more. That's not a weed problem. That's a control problem. Because once people understand they can grow complete nutrition that requires no inputs and answers to no corporation, the entire model of industrial agriculture is threatened. Now, I need to be very clear about something critical, and I need you to pay close attention. Palmer amaranth, Amaranthus palmeri, is classified as a noxious weed in multiple states. It is illegal to knowingly plant or propagate in many jurisdictions. The penalties are real. But Palmer amaranth is one species in a large family. The Amaranthus genus contains more than 60 species. Many of them are edible. Some have been cultivated as food crops for thousands of years. Edible, legal amaranth varieties include Amaranthus cruentus, red amaranth used for grain; Amaranthus hypochondriacus, prince's feather cultivated for seeds; Amaranthus caudatus, love lies bleeding, Andean grain amaranth; Amaranthus tricolor, Chinese spinach grown for leaves. These species are legal to grow, cultivate, and harvest in most places. Seeds are available from seed companies. They provide the same nutritional benefits as Palmer amaranth. The same complete protein, the same minerals, the same heat and drought tolerance. The reason I'm telling you about Palmer amaranth, the illegal one, is not to encourage you to break the law. It's to make you ask why one amaranth species is criminalized while its nearly identical cousins are sold in seed catalogs. The answer is simple. Palmer amaranth escaped control. It proved that amaranth doesn't need to be domesticated, doesn't need to be managed, and doesn't need to be purchased annually from seed companies. The legal amaranth varieties haven't escaped. They're still within the agricultural system. They're controlled. You buy the seeds, you plant them, you harvest them. And next year, you buy more seeds. Palmer amaranth doesn't play that game. It plants itself. It harvests itself through seed drop. It comes back year after year without permission. And that's why it's illegal. Let's talk about what amaranth, whether Palmer or cultivated varieties, actually provides nutritionally. because this is where the superiority becomes undeniable. Amaranth grain contains 15 to 18% protein by weight. For comparison, wheat, 12 to 14% protein. Rice, 7 to 8% protein. Corn, 9 to 10% protein. But the percentage is only part of the story. The quality of amaranth protein is what matters. Amaranth is rich in lysine, the essential amino acid that's deficient in virtually all grains. Lysine is what makes protein complete, usable by the body for muscle building, immune function, and growth. In wheat, lysine content is about 2.5 to 3% of total protein. In amaranth, it's 5 to 6%. That means amaranth provides double the lysine content of wheat. With adequate lysine, amaranth protein has a biological value approaching that of milk protein. Studies show protein digestibility of over 90% when cooked. Beyond protein, amaranth provides calcium, 159 milligrams per cup cooked, about 16% of daily needs. Iron, 5.2 milligrams per cup, 29% of daily needs. Magnesium, 160 milligrams per cup, 40% of daily needs. Phosphorus, 364 milligrams per cup, 52% of daily needs. Manganese, 2.1 milligrams per cup, 105% of daily needs. The calcium content is particularly important. Grains typically have minimal calcium. Rice has 21 milligrams per cup. Wheat has 34 milligrams. Amaranth has 159 milligrams. That's 4 to 7 times more calcium than any common grain. For people avoiding dairy, whether due to intolerance, ethics, or availability, amaranth provides plant-based calcium in amounts that actually matter nutritionally. The leaves are even more impressive. Young amaranth leaves, whether from Palmer or cultivated varieties, contain protein, up to 38% by dry weight in the leaves, calcium, 200 to 400 milligrams per 100 grams, fresh leaves, more than milk. Iron, higher than spinach. Vitamins A and C. In significant amounts, the leaves can be eaten throughout the growing season as a continuous harvest vegetable. Then, at the end of the season, you harvest grain from the same plants. It's a dual-purpose crop, providing both greens and grain. So here's what this means in practical terms. If you live in a place where summers are hot, water is scarce, and soil is poor, conditions that make conventional gardening difficult, amaranth thrives. If you're concerned about food security and want a crop that stores for years, reproduces itself abundantly, and provides complete nutrition, amaranth delivers. If you want to reduce dependence on annual seed purchases and corporate agricultural inputs, amaranth is open-pollinated, meaning you can save seeds forever. One packet of amaranth seeds from a seed company costs $3 to $5. That packet contains maybe 500 to 1,000 seeds. You plant them, and by the end of the season, each plant has produced 50,000 to 100,000 seeds. You now have enough seeds to plant several acres next year, or to trade, or to mill into flour for years of food. The seeds store in cool, dry conditions for 5 to 10 years minimum. The grain can be cooked like rice, popped like popcorn, or ground into flour for baking. Amaranth flour is gluten-free, making it safe for people with celiac disease. It's dense and slightly sweet, and works well mixed with other flours in bread, pancakes, and baked goods. Now here's the critical safety information you need to know. If you're interested in growing amaranth, grow the legal cultivated varieties. They're available from seed companies like Baker Creek, Southern Exposure Seed Exchange, and others. Do not attempt to cultivate Palmer amaranth or other species classified as noxious weeds in your state. The legal risks are real, and there's no reason to take them when legal varieties provide the same benefits. If you're foraging wild amaranth, make sure you can positively identify the species. Amaranth has some lookalikes in the Amaranthacea family. Learn the distinctive features: opposite leaves in young plants becoming alternate in mature plants, small flowers in dense clusters, and 3-segmented seed capsules. Harvest amaranth leaves from plants growing in clean soil away from roads, industrial areas, or places where herbicides may have been used. Young leaves, less than 6 inches, are most tender. Older leaves can be cooked like spinach. Amaranth leaves contain oxalates, which can interfere with calcium absorption if eaten in very large quantities raw. Cooking significantly reduces oxalate content. For most people eating reasonable amounts, this is not a concern. When harvesting seeds, wait until the seed heads are dry and seeds fall easily when rubbed. Cut entire seed heads and dry them further on tarps or in paper bags. Thresh by rubbing or beating to separate seeds from chaff. Winnow by pouring in front of a fan. Palmer Amaranth broke the chemical agriculture system because it revealed a truth that threatens billions of dollars in annual revenue. Plants that need nothing, that reproduce abundantly, that provide complete nutrition, and that thrive in hostile conditions don't fit the model of industrial agriculture. They can't be patented. They can't be controlled. They can't be sold year after year. So they're classified as weeds, made illegal, and actively eradicated. But the knowledge of what these plants can do, what they've done for thousands of years, cannot be erased as easily as fields can be burned. Every seed of Palmer Amaranth that sits viable in soil for 40 years is a reminder that nature didn't need Monsanto, didn't need Roundup, and didn't need corporate control to produce abundant nutrition. And every gardener who plants legal amaranth varieties and saves seeds is proving that food security doesn't require dependence on annual seed purchases or chemical inputs. The plant they made illegal to grow is impossible to kill because it represents something more powerful than any herbicide, the idea that food can be free, abundant, and answerable to no one. If this video showed you why the most illegal plant in America might be the most valuable for food security, share it with someone who needs to understand what they're not being told. Hit that subscribe button, because next week we're exposing the ancient tree that creates infinite food forever and why we switched to chemical agriculture to suppress it. Drop a comment and tell me, are you growing legal amaranth varieties? Have you found wild amaranth in your area? I want to know who's reclaiming what they tried to make illegal. The plants they criminalized are the plants that could set you free. Until next time, remember, when they make a food plant illegal, start asking why.